good? I think that's good. It's gonna be a long video. Look at all the notes I have just to talk about the video. Hey there, Susan. So last video I talked about how I was going on a really cool trip to Alaska. And oh my gosh, it was so cool. I want to start by thanking my friend Paul's dad. I guess he travels for work, and so he has a lot of air miles saved up and just very generously lent us some of his air miles. And maybe to him it was a minor inconvenience, but to us it saved us hundreds of dollars. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm not sure if you will ever watch this video, but thank you so much. Alright, on to the trip. We had to drive to Newark Airport, so we left at 8 p.m. Thursday night. And we arrived at Newark about 2:30 in the morning. Everyone was tired, but excited. How you feeling, Bonnie?
What do I look like I'm feeling?
Tired?
I feel great. Let's run a mile.
And I still couldn't sleep, so I decided to wander around the mostly empty airport.
Are you happy with your life choices?
There's so many ads. They're just like these ads that just spin around and around so that they catch your attention. And there's nothing to do at an airport at 3 in the morning. Bonnie was sleeping, the rest of us were just waiting. We successfully took off from Newark at 7 a.m. and landed in Seattle, safe and sound. And then we took off from Seattle and we saw our first glimpse of some real mountains from the airplane. And when we landed in Juneau, it felt like we were on our trip, finally.
We're in Alaska.
So our plane got super delayed in Juneau. We ended up staying in that airport for about 7 hours. It was hard to complain because we were in Alaska and we were just gonna be a few hours late. But it's no fun sitting in the airport being bored. Finally, at like 7 p.m. Alaska time, we took off from Juneau. And immediately when we landed in Anchorage, we saw the Northern Lights.
Oh, I got it. I was like, I didn't realize it was supposed to be Northern Lights related.
We were all very, very, very tired, and we just decided we wanted to go to the hotel and sleep. So we drove to the motel, and on the way there, it looks the same as New York City. Like, what distinguishes this as being Alaska? The lack of lines on the road! So, day number 1 in Anchorage. Day number 1 in Anchorage. We got in the car and we decided we'd go into town and visit a visitor center so we can get some information about what kinds of hikes would be interesting to go on. And on the way we heard this very strange radio story.
He let the arrow fly, then he thud. He was sure he had hit something.
Another arrow.
So we walk into town and we notice that a bunch of these streets are closed. So we walk in and we see all these puppies, these Iditarod puppies. And so then we start walking down the street and we get to the intersection and we realize everyone around us is wearing VIP badges. And this woman comes up to us and goes, "Where's your VIP badges?" And we're like, ah. We get ushered off onto the sidewalk and we find out that yes, this is in fact the start of the actual Iditarod race. We just walked into town and happened to be on day 1 of our vacation, the start of the Iditarod. And it was just really loud. There was so much excitement. All the dogs were barking. It was really exciting and cool. Bonnie, how did you feel about puppies?
They were adorable and fluffy.
Anchorage is a pretty large city and you drive around and there's buildings, but then when there's a break in the view, you just look and there's just mountains everywhere. And we drove down to the Alaskan Wildlife Conservation Center where we visited some animals, met some muskoxes, some bison.
1 bison.
That one's on
Two bison.
the hill, so clearly he is the king.
3, 4, 5, 6 bison, 7 bison, 8, 9, 10, 11, lots of bison. Bison.
And some moose. Now let me tell you, moose are ninjas, but we'll get to that later on. On the way back from the conservation center, you're just driving along this road that's right next to the land and the sea, surrounded by mountains, and it was breathtaking. We stopped by this little rock formation off of the road called Beluga Point, and you just stood there and have a great panorama shot of the mountains surrounding you. Mark, true to his form, climbed up this little rock formation. He was totally fine. It was a great first day. So day 2, we got up pretty early. We went to the Flat Top Mountain. The first thing we did was just a 1/4 mile loop, which was basically an outlook that looked over the city. And you could see the mountains we were about to climb. It was very snowy and it was very steep. And so it was tricky to climb. Because Anchorage has had a pretty warm winter, A lot of it was very icy, but we did our best. We got up pretty high and we had a really great view of the mountains during our lunchtime. So we decided to go all the way down and we ended up sliding down on our butts because it was so steep. And in the afternoon we went into town and we went shopping.
How many gift stores have we been to?
5?
So that night, even though the aurora radar didn't look too promising, we got out of bed and we looked for some northern lights, but we didn't find any.
Because there are no northern lights, Bonnie is doing her best impersonation.
They're so gross.
So then, day 3, on Monday, we drove up to Talkeetna, Alaska. There's probably 6 streets in this town, and there are 800 residents. And we met the mayor of this town, Stubbs the cat. He's not very interested in fame. All he wants to do is curl up under the coolers at his store and take a nap. We got a glimpse of him, so then we drove down to the end of Main Street. We had this really nice view of Mount McKinley, the tallest mountain in the United States. And then we drove home. So that night, we decided to try a different place to view the northern lights on the little quarter-mile overlook that we had taken. And we're standing and you can see Anchorage all lit up and the moon is in the sky, so it's lighting up the sky a little bit. And we're looking and we're like, I don't see any northern lights. And then Mark looks sort of over in the distance and he goes, is that a cloud or is that a mountain? And then slowly, over 10-20 seconds, it just started to fade into this bright green. And we just got so excited. We all started jumping up and down because that was it. We had seen our northern lights. It was really cool. And then it gradually faded out, you know, in the span of a few minutes. It had come and gone. But it was really cold and we all wanted to go back to the car and warm up and then try again and walk out and see if anything else showed up. So as we're walking back to the car, I hear a cough and I turn to Mark and I say, Mark, did you cough? And it turns out it was Bonnie. Bears were sort of on our minds. We turn around and we look out and you can sort of see the shadows of trees against the dark blue sky. And we saw this weird lumpy shape. And Mark says, is that an animal? And I said, no, that's just a tree. And then as we're looking, it moves. And we realize it's a giant moose. And we were terrified. All of my research on Alaskan wildlife told me that although bears can be really dangerous, it's actually the moose that are more likely to hurt you because they're just so much more unpredictable. We sort of jog back to the car, we get in the car, and we drive away. And we were just like, how did this moose? It was a ninja moose. Moose are ninjas. Day 4, Tuesday, we got up and we went out to hike in Kincaid Park, which is a park right next to the airport on the coast. And we were hiking along what in the winter should have been cross-country ski trails. But again, since it was so warm, all of the snow had melted and then frozen. So we're walking along these very icy trails, and some places they're very hilly. We were slipping a little bit, but it was a lot of fun. We walked all the way to this frozen lake, and you could see some people had cut away holes for ice fishing.
Are you sure? Are you really sure? Because when I was a kid, I floated just fine.
So we sat on the dock and had a very lovely lunch.
Holy shit, this lake is frozen.
We decided to go to Eagle River Valley, and they weren't the best hikes. They were mostly in the woods and very flat, and again, very icy because they were supposed to be cross-country skiing. And then we discovered that there were some old Iditarod trails, and we were still sliding all over the place. So that night, every half hour, I'd wake up and I'd look at the aurora forecast. 4 a.m., I got up and I looked, and I said, okay guys, maybe we'll see something. So we should just go. We should try. Everyone reluctantly agreed, and we got up and we drove out, and we see the coolest northern lights. It was just the most exciting thing ever.
We see the northern lights. We see the northern lights. Woo!
That ring that you saw in the sky, it was just so much cooler than that little streak of green. You just feel so energetic after seeing these lights in the sky. So the next day, day 5, Wednesday, packed up, we put everything in the car, and we drove to the Anchorage Zoo. There are a lot of animals at that zoo. Probably the highlight though, these 2 otters were play fighting the whole time. And then there was this other otter that was kind of like a third wheel. But we saw seals, we saw polar bears, we saw foxes.
And another fox. Right here.
We saw wolves, we saw birds, we saw these coyotes who were probably the most active other than the otters, chasing this little kid running back and forth against the fence. And then we left the zoo and we drove to this town called Whittier. So to get to Whittier, you have to take this tunnel. The tunnel is a one-way tunnel. Every half hour, they change which direction is open. And it felt like going through a tunnel in a roller coaster. So we go through the tunnel and we emerge into Whittier. Everything was basically closed. So we decided to go on this hike, Horse Trail Falls. And it turned out to be the best hike all four of us had ever done. So we were walking through a forest, snow and ice all in one. Just really cool. And it had really beautiful views. When we got to the top, we just had all this pent up energy.
Spotted us.
So Mark and Paul decided to take some action photos. This was a very cold day. It was like 12 Fahrenheit and windy. It was just a lot of fun, and it was our last day in Alaska. And then going down the trail, we just zipped on down the trail. Then we left Whittier, and we drove back to Anchorage to have some dinner. And then we drove to the airport, and we flew home. But at that point, I had learned how to properly sleep on a plane, and I think we all did. And that's it. That was my trip. It was amazing, and it was with my friends. Thinking back on my trip, I feel like this is something that Nana would really like to do. And if I were to give advice to anyone going to Alaska, I would suggest do your research beforehand. Anyway, Susan, I hope you're having a really great week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Beautiful drive. Don't you think so, Bonnie?
I do.
Don't you think so, Paul?